The wind howled through the Colorado mountains like a wounded beast, carrying with it the promise of another harsh winter. 7 feet tall and broad as an oak tree, Silas Kane stood at the edge of his property, watching the storm clouds gather over the peaks. His weathered hands gripped the axe handle as he split another log, the rhythm of his work as steady as his heartbeat had been for the past 15 years of solitude. They called him a monster down in Cedar Falls. Children were warned to stay away from the mountain where the giant lived, where the man who'd burned his own wife alive had fled to escape the hangman's noose. Silas had stopped trying to correct their stories long ago. Truth had a way of dying in small towns, especially when powerful men needed it buried. The cabin behind him was modest but sturdy, built with his own hands from the pines that surrounded it. Every beam, every stone in the chimney, every shingle on the roof. He'd placed them all in the years after Martha's death. It was his penance, his prison, and his sanctuary all at once. As darkness crept across the sky, Silas carried an armload of wood inside. The main room was sparse. A bed, a table, 2 chairs, though only one had been used in 15 years, and a stone fireplace. On the mantel sat a single photograph in a tarnished frame, Martha on their wedding day, her smile as bright as the Colorado sun. "Storm's coming in hard tonight," he said to the photograph. As was his custom, might be the last big one before winter sets in proper. He prepared his simple meal venison stew from a deer he'd shot 3 days prior, bread he'd baked that morning, and bitter coffee that had long ago stopped tasting like anything but routine. As he ate, memories drifted through his mind like smoke from the fire. He'd been Sheriff Silas Kane then, keeper of the peace in Cedar Falls. Martha had been the schoolteacher, gentle and kind, with a laugh that could fill a room. They'd been trying for a child, and when she'd finally told him the news, he'd spun her around in the middle of Main Street, not caring who saw the fearsome sheriff acting like a lovesick fool. Then came the night of the fire. He'd been called out to deal with rustlers on the Jameson Ranch, riding hard through the darkness. When he returned at dawn, he found his house in ashes and Martha's body inside. The baby she carried had died with her. Benjamin Croft, his own deputy, had been the first to suggest arson. "Found lamp oil outside. Sheriff," Croft had said, his face a mask of concern that Silas, in his grief, hadn't thought to question. "And witnesses say they saw you arguing with Martha yesterday." It had been about baby names, of all things. A playful disagreement that the gossips had twisted into something sinister. Within a week, half the town believed he'd killed her for the insurance money. The other half thought it was a crime of passion. When the judge, old Harold Whitmore's father, suggested Silas might want to leave town while the investigation continued, he'd seen the writing on the wall. So he'd left, climbed into these mountains with nothing but his horse, his guns, and the weight of accusations he couldn't disprove. The investigation never officially concluded. Silas Kane simply became the monster on the mountain, a cautionary tale for a town that preferred its stories simple and its truths buried. Thunder rolled across the peaks, pulling Silas from his reverie. He checked his rifles, secured the shutters, and prepared for the storm. Living this high up, blizzards could trap a man for weeks. But Silas had learned to read the mountain's moods like scripture. This one felt different somehow, charged with a significance he couldn't name. Miles below, at the mountain's base, a lone stagecoach struggled through the rising wind. Inside, Sarah Mills pressed her face against the cold glass window, though her sightless eyes saw nothing of the threatening sky. "We should stop," she said to the driver through the small window. "This storm feels wrong." "Orders are orders. Miss," the driver called back. "Mister, Whitmore wants you in Cedar Falls by week's end, and I aim to deliver." Sarah's fingers found the engagement ring on her left hand, a heavy thing that felt more like a shackle than a promise. Harold Whitmore had never met her, had chosen her from a catalog of mail-order brides based solely on her late father's respectable name and her substantial inheritance. The fact that fever had taken her sight at 19 hadn't been mentioned in the correspondence. She wondered how long after the wedding it would take him to discover his mistake. Her companion, an elderly woman hired to chaperone, snored softly in the opposite seat. Mrs. Garrett had made it clear she was being paid to deliver Sarah, not to protect her. 24 years old, blind, and heading toward a marriage arranged by relatives who saw her as a burden, Sarah had never felt more alone. The coach lurched violently, throwing her against the door. She heard the driver curse, the horses scream, and then the world turned upside down. The coach tumbled off the narrow mountain road, rolling twice before coming to rest against a stand of pines. The last thing Sarah remembered was the taste of blood and the strange peace that came with letting go. Dawn broke gray and bitter over the mountains. Silas woke with the inexplicable feeling that something had changed. The storm had passed, leaving 2 feet of fresh snow and an eerie silence. He made his coffee, checked his traps, and tried to shake the unease that clung to him like frost. It was the horse that decided him, a flash of movement through the trees that didn't belong. Horses meant people, and people meant trouble. But a horse in distress after last night's storm could mean someone needed help, despite 15 years of chosen solitude. Silas couldn't quite kill the instinct that had once made him a good sheriff. He found the overturned stagecoach an hour later. The horses were gone, either fled or taken by wolves. The driver lay frozen, his neck at an angle that made checking for a pulse unnecessary. The elderly woman inside had fared no better. Then he saw her, curled beneath a buffalo robe in the corner of the coach, blood frozen on her face, but her chest still rising and falling. Young, beautiful despite her injuries, and very much alive. Silas stared for a long moment, his heart doing something it hadn't done in 15 years. It hoped. Carefully, he extracted her from the wreckage. She weighed nothing in his arms, this slip of a woman who'd survived what should have killed her. As he carried her through the snow toward his cabin, she stirred slightly, her unseeing eyes fluttering open. "Please," she whispered, "please don't let him find me." Then unconsciousness took her again, leaving Silas to wonder who he was and what he'd just brought into his carefully isolated world. For the first time in 15 years, someone would cross the threshold of his cabin. Someone would sit in Martha's chair, sleep in the bed he'd built for 2, and shatter the silence he'd wrapped around himself like armor. As he climbed the last hill to his cabin, the morning sun broke through the clouds, setting the snow-covered peaks ablaze with light. Change was coming to the mountain, whether Silas Kane was ready or not. Sarah woke to warmth and the scent of wood smoke. For a moment, she thought she was back in Boston, in her father's house before the fever took her sight. Then pain lanced through her ribs, and memory crashed back, the storm, the coach tumbling, the terrible cold. "Easy now," a deep voice rumbled from somewhere to her left. "You've got some busted ribs and a good knock on the head. Best not move too quick." She turned toward the voice, instinctively trying to see its owner, though her eyes showed her nothing but darkness. "Where am I?" "My cabin. Found you in that wrecked coach this morning. You're lucky to be breathing." His voice was like distant thunder, powerful but carefully controlled. Sarah's fingers explored her surroundings, finding rough wool blankets and what felt like a bearskin beneath her. "The others, Mrs. Garrett, the driver. Dead. I'm sorry." The blunt honesty of it somehow comforted her more than gentle lies would have. She'd learned to distrust people who softened hard truths. "What's your name?" she asked. A long pause. "Silas." "Just Silas." "Just Silas is enough." She heard him move, heavy footsteps that should have frightened her but didn't. There was something in the way he'd carried her. She remembered now, gentle despite his obvious strength. "I'm Sarah Mills, or I was. I suppose I'm meant to be Sarah Whitmore soon." Her fingers found the ring again, and without thinking, she pulled it off and set it on what felt like a bedside table. The small act of defiance made her feel more like herself than she had in months. Harold Whitmore's bride. There was something sharp in his tone now. The one from the advertisements. You know him? I knew his father. Apple didn't fall far from that particular tree. Sarah pushed herself up despite the pain, needing to be more than a helpless invalid in a stranger's bed. I require... Outhouse is 20 steps from the front door. Straight ahead, Silas said, understanding immediately. Storm's passed, but it's cold. I'll help you. I can manage. With broken ribs and a head injury and 2 feet of snow. She heard amusement in his voice now. Pride's a fine thing, Miss Mills, but it makes a poor crutch. He helped her to her feet, and for the first time, Sarah understood the rumors she'd heard whispered at the stage stops. Silas was enormous. Her head barely reached his chest, and his hands could have circled her waist entirely. But those hands were careful as they steadied her, patient as she found her balance. You're very tall, she said, then immediately felt foolish. So I've been told. He guided her outside, describing the path, warning her of obstacles. The mountain air bit at her exposed skin, but it cleared her head. When they returned, he settled her in what felt like a rocking chair near the fire. Hungry? Yes, actually, starving. She heard him moving around what must have been the kitchen area. Pots clanged. Wood was added to the stove, and soon the smell of cooking filled the cabin. May I? She asked, gesturing vaguely around her. May you what? Touch things. Learn where I am. I can't see, but I've learned to map places with my hands. Go ahead. Sarah stood carefully and began exploring. The cabin was simple but well made. Everything was practical, placed with purpose. Her fingers found the photograph on the mantel, tracing the ornate frame. Your wife. Was. The single word carried 15 years of grief. She was beautiful, Sarah said, though she couldn't see the picture. Somehow, she knew it must be true. A man who kept a photograph like a shrine would have loved a beautiful woman. Inside and out, Silas agreed quietly. Sarah's exploration continued. She found his books, not many, but well read, a Bible, some Shakespeare, a medical text, farmers' almanacs. On a shelf sat something unexpected, a wooden carving of a bird, wings spread in flight. You made this. Winters are long up here. She smiled, the first real smile in weeks. It's lovely. I can feel every feather. When he served the meal venison stew and fresh bread, they ate in companionable silence. Sarah found herself relating the story of her blindness, how fever had stolen her sight but sharpened her other senses, how her relatives had declared her unmarriageable, a burden, until Harold Whitmore's advertisement seeking a respectable woman of good family had seemed like salvation. 2 wives dead in 5 years, Silas said bluntly. Both from falls, suspicious falls. Sarah's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. The marriage broker said they were sickly. Mary Whitmore could outride most men. Elizabeth was 22 and healthy as a horse. Until they weren't. And you think... I don't think. I know. But knowing and proving are different things when a man owns half the county and the other half owes him money. Sarah set down her spoon, appetite gone. I can't go back. No, Silas agreed. You can't. Over the next days, they developed a routine. Silas would help her to the chair by the fire each morning, then go about his chores, checking traps, chopping wood, tending to the animals. Sarah insisted on helping where she could, learning to prepare simple meals by touch and smell, mending clothes with careful stitches. In the evenings, he read to her from his small library. His voice transformed when he read, losing its careful control and finding rhythms she suspected he'd hidden for years. She told him stories in return, about Boston, about the music she'd loved before the fever, about the way colors felt different when you remembered them instead of seeing them. One evening, as snow began falling again, Sarah asked the question that had haunted her since arriving. What did you do? Silas, what made you hide up here? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "I was sheriff in Cedar Falls, had a wife, a child on the way, a life that made sense. Then someone burned our house down with Martha inside. They said I did it, said we'd been fighting, that I wanted her money. Truth was, we'd been arguing about baby names. She wanted Elizabeth for a girl, I wanted Mary, after my mother." His laugh was bitter. "Both names that killed Harold Whitmore's wives later. Funny how things turn out." "You think I think his father, the judge, needed me gone. I was investigating some land deals, getting close to something that would have sent important men to prison. Martha died. I got run out of town, and those land deals made a lot of people rich. Draw your own conclusions." Sarah reached out, finding his hand in the darkness. It was like holding a bear's paw, all calluses and strength, but it trembled slightly at her touch. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "Been 15 years? You'd think a man would be over it by now. Some wounds don't heal. They just learn to be quiet." He turned his hand, enveloping hers carefully. That's the truth of it. They sat like that as the fire burned low, two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in shared silence. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "I won't be his third dead wife. Silas." "No," he agreed. "You won't." "Then I'll need to stay here, at least until I can figure out where else to go." "You're welcome as long as you need. Martha would have—" He paused, swallowed hard. "She would have liked you. Would have said you've got spine." Sarah smiled in the darkness. "Spine and broken ribs. They'll heal. Both make you stronger in the end." That night, as Silas banked the fire and prepared his bedroll on the floor, refusing to let her give up the bed, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Safety. Not just from Harold Whitmore and whatever fate he'd planned for her, but the deeper safety of being with someone who understood brokenness. "Silas," she called softly. "Yeah. Thank you for saving me, for—" She gestured helplessly at the cabin, at everything. "Thank you," he replied after a moment. "For needing saved. Been a long time since I felt useful to anyone but myself." As sleep took her, Sarah wondered at the strange turns of fate. A monster on a mountain who was really a grieving widower. A blind bride who'd found her sight in the darkness of a stranger's cabin. And somewhere below them, a town built on lies that would soon learn the truth had a way of climbing mountains when it needed to. The blue ribbon she'd kept as a memento of her old life lay on the table beside Whitmore's ring. In the morning, Silas would notice it and tuck it carefully into a drawer, recognizing a token of hope when he saw one. But tonight, they both slept peacefully while the mountain kept its watch and the snow covered their tracks, hiding them from the world that would soon come looking. Winter descended on the mountain like a predator stalking its prey. Each day brought new challenges. Howling winds that threatened to tear the roof off, snow that piled higher than the windows, temperatures that turned water to ice before it could hit the ground. Silas had weathered 15 such winters alone, but this one was different. This one, he had someone to protect. Sarah had healed well from her injuries, though her ribs still pained her on cold mornings. She'd adapted to the cabin's layout with remarkable speed, moving through the spaces with growing confidence. But the mountain itself was another matter. "You can't wander off," Silas told her for the 10th time after finding her outside, disoriented in the swirling snow. "This isn't Boston. The mountain doesn't forgive mistakes." "I was just getting water from the stream," she protested, though her chattering teeth undermined her defiance. "Stream's frozen solid. Has been for 2 weeks." He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, trying not to notice how small she felt in his arms. "You want water? You tell me. You need anything? You tell me. Pride won't keep you warm when you're lost in a blizzard." She nodded, but he saw the frustration in the set of her jaw. Sarah Mills wasn't used to being dependent on anyone, and it chafed at her like a poorly fitted saddle. The real danger came 3 weeks later. Silas had gone to check his trap line, leaving Sarah with strict instructions to stay inside. The weather had been calm, the kind of crisp, clear day that made the mountains seem almost welcoming. He should have known better. Sarah heard it first, a sound like breathing outside the cabin door, but wrong somehow. Too deep, too deliberate. She froze at the table where she'd been kneading bread dough. "Silas," she called softly, knowing even as she did that he was too far away to hear. The breathing came again, followed by a low growl that raised every hair on her neck. Mountain lion. She'd heard Silas mention them, how hunger drove them down from the high peaks in hard winters. The door latch rattled. Sarah's mind raced. The rifle was by the door, useless to her even if she could reach it. The knife she'd been using was on the counter, but what good would that do against a cat that could kill with a single swipe? The window shutter banged open. She heard claws on wood, smelled the wild musk of predator. The cat was inside. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but where? She couldn't see the threat, couldn't judge distance or direction. So Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She went absolutely still. The mountain lion prowled through the cabin, knocking over a chair, investigating this new territory. Sarah held her breath, praying it would lose interest and leave. Then her hip bumped the table, sending a pot clattering to the floor. The cat's attention snapped to her. She heard its approach, soft pads on wooden floors, that terrible breathing getting closer. Sarah grabbed the only weapon at hand, the heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove. "Get back!" she shouted, swinging the pan in wide arcs. "Get out!" The lion circled, testing. She could feel its presence, the displacement of air as it moved. When it finally pounced, some primitive instinct saved her. She dropped and rolled, bringing the skillet up hard. It connected with something solid, earning a yowl of pain and rage. Claws raked across her back, tearing through wool and flesh. Sarah screamed but kept swinging, kept fighting. The cabin became a battlefield. Furniture overturning, dishes crashing, woman and beast locked in desperate combat. Then thunder shook the cabin. Once, twice. The mountain lion's snarls cut off abruptly. Sarah heard its body hit the floor. Then Silas was there, pulling her against him, his hands checking her injuries. "It's dead," he said, voice rough. "You're safe. God Almighty. Sarah, you're safe." She was shaking too hard to speak, clinging to him as reaction set in. Blood soaked through her dress where the claws had found their mark, but she was alive. "How?" she finally managed. "Heard you screaming from half a mile off. Never run so fast in my life." His hands were gentle as they examined her wounds. "These need cleaning, stitching too. It's going to hurt." "Can't be worse than fighting a mountain lion with a skillet." He laughed, actually laughed, a sound she'd never heard from him before. "No, I suppose not. Bravest damn thing I've ever seen. Also the most foolish." As he cleaned and stitched her wounds by lamplight, Sarah bit down on a leather strap to keep from crying out. When it was over, when she was bandaged and dosed with whiskey for the pain, Silas sat beside her on the bed. "I thought I'd lost you," he admitted quietly. "Saw that cat through the window, saw you fighting, and I thought—" He stopped, unable to finish. Sarah reached for his face, her fingers finding the wetness on his cheeks. This mountain of a man, this so-called monster, was crying for her. "You didn't lose me," she said softly. "I'm tougher than I look." "That you are." He caught her hand, pressed it against his cheek. "Sarah, She knew what he wanted to say, could feel it in the trembling of his hands, hear it in the break of his voice. She'd been feeling it too, this unexpected thing growing between them like wildflowers pushing through snow. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." He kissed her then, careful of her injuries but unable to hold back any longer. It was a kiss that tasted of desperation and hope, of loneliness ending and something new beginning. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is madness." Silas said. "You're half my age. You deserve better than a broken-down hermit with more past than future." "Don't!" Sarah said fiercely. "Don't you dare tell me what I deserve. I've had people telling me what I can and can't do my whole life, telling me I'm too fragile, too damaged, too blind to know my own mind. I won't hear it from you too." She pulled him down for another kiss, pouring all her frustration and determination into it. "I choose this," she said against his lips. "I choose you. The question is whether you're brave enough to choose me back." Silas pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of her bandages. "Already did," he admitted. "Moment I saw you in that coach, something in me woke up. Tried to ignore it. Tried to tell myself I was just being a fool. But you fought a mountain lion with a skillet." His voice held wonder. "How's a man supposed to resist a woman like that?" They held each other as the night deepened, sharing kisses and quiet confessions. Silas told her about the dreams where Martha forgave him for surviving. Sarah spoke of the darkness that had become her world and how he'd brought a different kind of light into it. "Sometimes," she said, tracing patterns on his chest, "the things we fear most are exactly what we need. I was terrified when I woke up here, though I was too proud to show it. The monster on the mountain. They called you. And instead I found the most decent man I've ever known. Gentle despite your strength. Honorable despite what the world did to you. You could have taken advantage. Could have been the monster they paint you as. Instead, you gave me safety. Gave me choice." Silas was quiet for a long moment. "Martha used to say I collected strays, dogs, cats, injured birds. Said I couldn't help trying to fix broken things. Is that what I am, another stray to fix? No." He tipped her chin up, wished she could see the certainty in his eyes. "You're the one doing the fixing. Sarah Mills, 15 years I've been frozen up here, afraid to feel anything because feeling meant remembering what I'd lost. Then you came along and melted everything I'd built to protect myself." Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her face. Like spring coming to the mountain. Just like that. They talked through the night, making plans and sharing fears. Come morning, the blood-stained floor and the dead mountain lion would need dealing with. Come spring, the world would intrude with all its complications. Harold Whitmore wondering about his missing bride, the truth about Martha's death still demanding justice. But for now, in the warm circle of lamplight with the winter wind howling outside, two wounded souls found healing in each other's arms. Silas traced the curve of Sarah's face, memorizing it by touch as she had learned to do with everything. "No more being alone," Sarah said sleepily. "No more," he agreed, and for the first time in 15 years, Silas Kane meant it. The blue ribbon Sarah had saved lay on the nightstand, a small token of the life she was leaving behind. Next to it, Harold Whitmore's ring glinted coldly in the lamplight. But neither of them looked at these symbols of the past. They had eyes only for each other and for the future they were daring to imagine. One where monsters could become men again, and blind women could see more clearly than anyone with sight. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the mountain lion's tracks and the blood on the cabin's threshold. The mountain kept its secrets, protecting those who respected its ways. And in the cabin beneath the peaks, two people who had thought themselves beyond saving discovered that sometimes the most unexpected rescues were the ones that lasted forever. The morning after the mountain lion attack, Sarah woke to find Silas already up, sitting at the table with something in his hands. She could hear the whisper of paper, the careful way he held it. "What is it?" she asked, making her way to him despite the pull of healing wounds. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "A letter. One I wrote to Martha after she died. Never sent it, of course. Dead don't read mail." Sarah settled beside him, her hand finding his. "Will you read it to me?" "It's foolish. Just the ravings of a grieving man." "Please." He cleared his throat and began. "My dearest Martha, they say you're gone, but I see you everywhere. In the morning light through our kitchen window, In the garden where your roses are already dying without your touch. In the empty side of our bed that still smells of your lavender soap. They say I killed you. Ben Croft found lamp oil. They say witnesses heard us arguing. They say, but they didn't see your smile when we fought about baby names. They didn't hear your laugh when you threatened to name our daughter Prudence just to spite me. I should have been here. Should have told the Jameson Ranch to handle their own rustlers. Should have known something was wrong when Ben insisted I go personally, but I was proud. Wanted to show I was still the sheriff who protected everyone, even with a baby on the way. I failed you, my love. Failed our child. Failed at the one job that truly mattered, keeping you safe. I'm leaving tomorrow. The judge suggested it, and I can read between those lines. Better to run than hang for something I didn't do. Though sometimes I wonder if hanging wouldn't be more merciful than living without you. I love you. I will always love you. And someday, somehow, I'll prove what really happened that night. Until we meet again, your devoted Silas. His voice broke on the last words. Sarah felt tears on her own cheeks, understanding now the depth of pain he'd carried all these years. She would have treasured that letter, Sarah said softly. You think so? I know so. It's beautiful. Silas, heartbreaking and beautiful. He folded the letter carefully, returning it to the wooden box where he kept his few precious things. I write to her sometimes. When the loneliness gets too heavy, stopped believing she could hear me years ago, but the writing helps. Sarah turned his face toward her, thumbs brushing away the wetness on his weathered cheeks. She heard you, maybe not the way we understand hearing, but love like that doesn't just disappear. It changes form, maybe, but it stays. You believe that? I have to. It's how I still feel my father's presence sometimes. In the music he taught me to love. How I know my mother's watching when I use her recipes. She smiled sadly, though I suspect she's appalled at how I've adapted them for cooking blind. That drew a small laugh from him. Martha would have liked you, he said again. She had a way of seeing the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. Then we have something in common. They sat in comfortable silence as morning light filled the cabin. Finally, Silas spoke again. There's more to the story, about that night, things I've pieced together over the years. Tell me. Ben Croft, my deputy, he was ambitious, wanted to be sheriff, thought he deserved it more than me. And Harold Whitmore's father, the judge, he had plans, land deals that needed certain properties to suddenly become available. Properties like the Thompsons' farm, the Clearwater Ranch, and our house. Sarah's breath caught. Your house was on valuable land. Right where they wanted to run the new railroad spur. Worth 10 times what I paid for it. If you knew the railroad was coming. Which I didn't, but the judge did. So they killed her for land. Killed her, framed me, got me run out of town. Ben became sheriff, the judge got his railroad, and everyone made money except the folks who lost their homes to mysterious fires and accidents over the next few years. My God! Sarah gripped his hand tighter. We have to tell someone. The federal marshals, the territorial governor. With what proof? My word against theirs, the word of a man everyone believes is a killer. Sarah stood abruptly, pacing despite the danger of unseen obstacles. There has to be something, papers, witnesses, something they overlooked. Sarah. He caught her gently, stilling her agitated movement. It's been 15 years. Any evidence is long gone. Any witnesses dead or paid off. I've made my peace with it. Have you? She pulled away from him. Have you really? Because the man who writes letters to his dead wife doesn't sound at peace to me. He sounds like someone still fighting, still hoping for justice. What would you have me do, march down there and demand satisfaction? Get myself hanged for real this time? No! Sarah's voice turned fierce. But I won't let you give up either. You saved my life, Silas. Now let me help save yours. My life doesn't need saving. Doesn't it, living up here alone? Letting them paint you as a monster? Never fighting back? That's not living. That's just existing. Her words hit him like physical blows because they were true. He'd been a ghost for 15 years, haunting his own life. "Sarah, I can't lose anyone else. If we go after Whitmore and Croft, they'll come for us. And I won't risk you." "That's not your choice to make." She found his face again, framed it with determined hands. "I told you before, don't tell me what I can and can't risk. We're partners now. Remember, that means we face things together." Silas covered her hands with his own. "When did you get so stubborn?" "Probably around the time I decided to fight a mountain lion with cookware." "Despite everything," he laughed. "Fair point." They spent the rest of the morning on the cabin's small porch, wrapped in buffalo robes against the cold. The mountains spread before them in winter glory peaks, sharp as knife edges, valleys soft with snow. Sarah couldn't see it, but she could feel it, the vast indifference of nature, the peace that came from being so far from human machinations. "I want to stay," she said suddenly. "Course you're staying. Where else would you go in winter?" "No, I mean, when spring comes, when the pass is clear. I want to stay here, with you." Silas was quiet so long she wondered if he'd heard her. Then, "This is no life for a woman like you. Isolation, hard work, danger." "A woman like me?" Her voice turned sharp. "You mean a blind woman, a helpless, fragile?" "I mean a woman who deserves better than a broken-down hermit hiding from the world." He pulled her closer, tucking her head under his chin. "You're young, beautiful, capable of so much more than wasting away on a mountain." "What if I don't see it as wasting away? What if I see it as building something new? A life where we're not defined by what others did to us?" "Sarah, do you love me, Silas?" The question hung between them like morning mist. Finally, inevitably, he answered, "Yes." "Then stop trying to protect me from my own choices. I've spent years having others decide what's best for me. Don't you start too." He pressed his lips to her hair, breathing in the scent of her. "You know Whitmore will come looking come spring. Man doesn't lose a bride and forget about it." "Then we'll be ready for him." We, she tilted her head up, finding his lips with uncanny accuracy. "I told you, partners." That afternoon, clouds rolled in from the west, heavy with the promise of more snow. They worked together to prepare, Silas splitting wood while Sarah organized supplies, taking inventory of their food stores. "We'll need to stretch what we have," she said, running her hands over sacks of flour and beans. "How long until you can hunt again?" "Depends on the weather. Could be days, could be weeks." "Then we ration." She'd already started planning meals in her head, calculating portions. "I've made do with less." He watched her work. This slip of a woman who'd adapted to his rough cabin like she'd been born to it, who spoke of staying as if it were the most natural thing in the world, who faced the prospect of Harold Whitmore's vengeance without flinching. "Sarah?" "I love you too, in case that wasn't clear." She smiled, that radiant expression that transformed her whole face. "It was clear, but it's nice to hear the words." That night, as fresh snow began to fall, they made plans. Come spring, they would need to be ready. For Whitmore, for Croft, for whatever the world would throw at them. "We'll need help," Silas admitted reluctantly. "Can't face them alone." "Do you know anyone? Anyone who might believe the truth?" He thought of Tom Harrison, the federal marshal who'd questioned the investigation years ago, a good man who'd been overruled by local authority. "Maybe there's a man, a marshal. Haven't heard from him in years. But if he's still alive, then we write to him." Sarah said firmly, "We start building our case. Gather what evidence we can. And if there isn't any evidence, then we make them reveal themselves. Men like Whitmore and Croft, they're arrogant. They think they've gotten away with it. That kind of confidence makes people careless." Silas pulled her close, marveling at her courage. "You're something else. Sarah Mills." "Sarah Kane," she corrected softly. "When the time comes, if you'll have me." His heart stopped, then resumed at double speed. "Sarah, I know we can't make it official yet, but in my heart, I'm already yours. Have been since you risked everything to save a stranger in a snowstorm." He kissed her then, pouring 15 years of loneliness and newfound hope into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "Sarah Kane," he repeated, testing the words. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." Outside, winter raged on, but inside their cabin, two souls began planning for spring, for justice, for a future neither had dared imagine until now. The letter to Martha lay in its box, a testament to old love and loss. But new love was writing its own story now, one of redemption and second chances. And somewhere in the valley below, Harold Whitmore studied maps and counted days, unaware that his carefully laid plans were about to unravel at the hands of a giant and a blind woman who'd found strength in each other's broken places. The old sheriff's badge lay heavy in Sarah's hands. Silas had dug it out from beneath a loose floorboard, along with other remnants of his former life legal documents, case notes, and maps marked with properties that had changed hands after mysterious accidents. "Feel the weight of it," he said quietly. "That tin star once meant something in Cedar Falls. Law, order, justice, all the things they took away when they took Martha." Sarah's fingers traced the engraved letters. "Sheriff Silas Kane," she read, though of course she couldn't see the words. She'd developed a way of understanding through touch that went beyond simple recognition. "You were young when you got this." 25. Youngest sheriff the county ever had. Thought I could change things. Make a difference." His laugh was bitter. "Fool boys' dreams." "Not foolish. They feared you enough to destroy you. That means you were doing something right." She set the badge aside and picked up a photograph. Not Martha this time, but a group of men standing before the sheriff's office. "Tell me about them." "That's me in the center. Ben Croft to my left. See how he's already edging into the middle. Even then, man to my right is Tom Harrison, federal marshal. Good man. He's the one who might help us, if he's still alive." And the older man, standing apart, Judge Whitmore, Harold's father. See how his hand rests on Ben's shoulder. I was too green to notice it then, but looking back, the alliance was already there. Sarah set the photograph down carefully. "We need to understand the pattern. You said other properties burned or had accidents. Tell me about them." For the next hour, Silas laid out the history she couldn't see in the documents. The Thompson farm burned 6 months after Martha. Family dead. Land sold cheap to a company that turned out to be owned by Judge Whitmore. The Clearwater Ranch, well poisoned. Cattle dead. Forced to sell. The Martinez homestead, mysterious rock slide. No survivors. All along the proposed railroad route, Sarah said, understanding dawning. They weren't random. It was planned elimination. Took me years to see it. By then, I was the ghost on the mountain and nobody would listen to a ghost. Sarah stood, pacing as she processed. But Harold Whitmore isn't his father. Why would he want me dead? His first wife came with property, the Garrison spread, prime cattle land. She died. He inherited. Second wife had mining claims from her father. She died. He inherited. And I have my father's Boston shipping interests. Sarah's hand went to her throat. Not much, but enough to matter to a greedy man. Plus, you're blind. Easier to arrange an accident for someone who can't see danger coming. The casual cruelty of it made her shiver. Silas wrapped his arms around her from behind, solid and warm. But he didn't count on you, she said, leaning back against him. Or on you being tougher than you look. Man plans to marry and murder you. Probably doesn't expect you to survive a stagecoach wreck and fight off a mountain lion. His mistake. They spent the afternoon going through more documents. Sarah couldn't read them, but she asked pointed questions that helped Silas see patterns he'd missed. Her mind was sharp, trained by years of having to think around her limitations. This receipt, she said, holding up a paper. "What is it?" "Lamp oil. From Croft's General Store. Dated a week before the fire." "You didn't buy it." "Never shopped at Croft's place. Ben's family owned it, and his prices were robbery. I used Henderson's store across town." "So someone bought lamp oil in your name, creating evidence." She set it carefully in their growing pile of clues. "What else?" They found more witness statements that didn't match. Property transfers that happened too quickly. Death certificates signed by the same doctor who'd later died in a hunting accident. "Dr. Marcus Fell," Silas said. "Good man, but weak. Gambling debts. They owned him. And when he started showing signs of conscience, they eliminated him too." As evening approached, Silas retrieved writing materials. "Time to contact Tom Harrison. If he's still marshalling, he'll be in Denver." "What do we tell him?" "The truth, that I'm alive, that Sarah Mills is with me, and that we have information about murders going back 15 years. Sarah helped compose the letter, her suggestions making it clearer, more compelling." When it was finished, Silas read it back to her. "It's good," she said. "But how do we send it? You can't go to town." "There's a trapper comes through every few weeks. Jake Parsons, trustworthy man. Keeps his mouth shut. He'll be by soon if the weather holds." They sealed the letter with wax, pressing Silas's old badge into it to make a seal. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, using the symbol of his destroyed career to seek justice. That night, as they prepared for bed, Sarah asked, "What was Ben Croft like before? I mean—" Silas considered. "Charming. Quick with a smile. Good with people. Everything I wasn't. Really, I was always too serious. Too focused on the job. Ben could work a room, make everyone feel important. You trusted him. With my life, which is why I rode out that night when he said the Jamesons needed help. Never questioned it." He paused. "Martha didn't like him. Said he smiled too much, like he was always selling something." "Smart woman." "Smarter than me." Silas pulled her close. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not just existing anymore. And you're right. I've been dead as long as Martha, just walking around still. But these past months with you, I want to live again. Want to fight for something besides just surviving another winter." Sarah found his face in the darkness, kissed him softly. "Then we fight, together." "Together," he agreed. "Though I still say you're getting the raw end of this deal. Trading Boston society for a mountain cabin and a man with more enemies than friends. Boston society never saw me as anything but damaged goods after I went blind. Here, I'm just Sarah. You're Sarah. That's worth more than all the tea parties and social calls in the world." They made love then, careful of her still healing wounds, but unable to deny the connection between them any longer. Afterward, lying entwined while wind howled outside, Sarah traced patterns on his chest. "Tell me about spring here," she said. "What's it like when the snow melts?" "Green," Silas said, his voice soft with memory. "So green it hurts your eyes. Wildflowers everywhere, columbine, Indian paintbrush, mountain laurel. The streams run fast and cold with snowmelt. Bears come out of hibernation, eagles return to nest. It's like the whole mountain wakes up at once. I want to experience it with you, all of it." "You will," he promised. "We'll make it to spring, and then we'll make them pay for what they took from us." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Do you think Martha would approve of us? I mean—" "I know she would." Martha believed in second chances. In love, finding a way. She'd probably scold me for taking so long to let you in. I wish I could have met her. In a way, you have every gentle thing I know how to do. I learned from her. She taught me that strength wasn't just about being big or tough. Real strength was protecting what matters, standing up for people who can't stand for themselves. Like you stood up for me. Like you stood up to that mountain lion. We're well matched. Sarah Kane. She smiled at the name he'd started using. the future they were claiming despite everything standing against them. Outside, snow continued to fall, but inside they were warm, safe, and no longer alone. In the morning, Jake Parsons would come by for supplies. A letter would go out. Wheels would be set in motion. Harold Whitmore and Benjamin Croft had no idea their past sins were about to catch up with them, delivered by a ghost and the blind woman who'd given him reason to rejoin the living. But tonight, there was only the crackle of the fire, the whisper of skin against skin, and two hearts learning to beat as one. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. "Sarah," Silas whispered into the darkness. "I'll put a ring on you before winter ends. A real one. A promise that whatever comes, we face it as family." She turned in his arms, kissing him deeply. "I'll hold you to that, Sheriff Kane." And in the darkness of a mountain cabin, with justice calling and danger approaching, they held each other and believed in tomorrow. Sometimes, that's all the hope anyone needs. Winter tightened its grip on the mountain like a fist. The storms came in waves, each one burying the cabin deeper in snow until only the chimney smoke revealed human habitation. For days at a time, the world shrank to just the four walls around them and the circle of warmth from the fire. Silas had lived through such isolations before, but never like this. Never with someone whose presence transformed confinement into contentment. They developed rhythms as natural as breathing. Sarah's hands finding his in the darkness, his voice painting pictures of the world her eyes couldn't see. Both of them creating a life from the simplest ingredients: conversation, touch, and time. "Tell me about the stars," she said one clear night when the storms had briefly passed. They stood wrapped in buffalo robes on the porch, the cold so intense it made the boards crack beneath their feet. "There's Orion," Silas said, guiding her hand to point skyward. "The hunter. 3 stars make his belt, and his sword hangs below. The Lakota call him Tayamnikanku, the spine of the universe. My father taught me the constellations when I could still see. I remember them like distant friends." She leaned into his warmth. "What else?" "The Milky Way stretches across like a river of light. So many stars you can't count them, all bleeding together into one bright path. Martha used to say it was the trail of souls going home." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Do you think they're together, your Martha and my parents?" "I hope so. Like to think they're watching us, maybe even conspiring a little. Your father thinking, my daughter could do better than that mountain hermit, and Martha telling him to hush up and mind his own business." Sarah laughed, the sound bright in the crystal air. "My father would have liked you. He respected men who stood by their principles, even when it cost them." They went back inside when the cold became too much, settling by the fire where Silas had been teaching her to carve. Her hands were learning to shape wood by feel, creating simple forms: a bird, a cup, a whistle. "You're getting good at that," he said, watching her work. "I like it. It's something I can do without sight. Create something from nothing but touch and patience. Like you've done with me." She set down her knife, finding his hand. "You weren't nothing, Silas. You were just sleeping, like the mountain in winter, waiting for spring." The letter to Tom Harrison had gone out with Jake Parsons 2 weeks ago. Now they waited, knowing that even if the marshal received it, responding would take time. The snow-blocked passes meant no one was traveling unnecessarily. But Harold Whitmore wasn't waiting for spring. "Riders," Silas said one morning, peering through the frost-covered window. 3 of them, working their way up from the valley. Sarah's hand stilled on the dough she'd been kneading. "How far?" "Day, maybe 2 in the snow. They're checking the old mining camps, looking for something." He paused. "Looking for you." "What do we do?" "We make them think you died in that crash. Give them what they expect to find." They worked quickly. Silas retrieved Sarah's traveling cloak, the one she'd worn in the stagecoach. He trudged through the snow to a ravine a mile from the cabin, where he carefully placed the cloak on a jutting rock, adding her hair combs and one shoe. The wind and weather would do the rest, making it look like evidence of a body claimed by scavengers and the elements. "Your blue ribbon," he said when he returned. "They'll need to find that too." Sarah clutched it reflexively. Such a small thing. But it was her last link to the life before, to the girl who'd boarded a stagecoach to marry a stranger. "Sarah." "No, you're right." She pressed it into his hand. "Let that girl be dead. I'm someone else now." He kissed her forehead, then ventured out again to place the ribbon where it would be found. By the time the riders reached that area, it would look exactly like what they wanted to see: the scattered remains of Harold Whitmore's missing bride. They spent the next days in tense waiting. Silas kept watch while Sarah continued their daily routines, refusing to let fear paralyze her. She cooked, mended, carved, and sang old songs her mother had taught her, filling the cabin with defiant life. On the third day, Silas spotted the riders again, distant figures heading back down the mountain. "They're leaving," he reported. "Found what they were looking for. Seems like..." Will they believe it? Men like Whitmore believe what's convenient. A blind woman surviving a coach wreck, wolves, and winter easier to write her off as dead and move on to the next scheme. That night they celebrated quietly with the last of Silas's whiskey, toasting their small victory. But both knew it was temporary. Spring would come, and with it, a reckoning. "I've been thinking," Sarah said as they lay together, "about when this is over. Dangerous to think too far ahead. Humor me." She traced the scars on his chest, old wounds from his lawman days. "What do you really want?" Silas was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Peace," he finally said. "A life where I'm not looking over my shoulder, where you can walk in sunlight without fear. Maybe children. Little wild things with your stubbornness and my hard head." "Children," she repeated softly. "I'd like that. Teaching them the mountains like you've taught me. Showing them that there's more than one way to see the world." "You'd be a good mother. You'll be a good father. You've had enough practice rescuing strays." He chuckled. "That's true enough." They talked through the night about possibilities. A ranch in a valley somewhere. Horses, a garden, a life built on love instead of fear. It was dreaming. They both knew it. But on a winter night with wolves howling in the distance, dreams were as necessary as firewood. 2 weeks later, Jake Parsons returned with supplies and a letter. Silas read it aloud, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Silas, God Almighty, you're alive. I'd given up hope years ago. Got your letter. Read it 3 times to be sure I wasn't dreaming. The things you're telling me match suspicions I've harbored for 15 years. I remember questioning the investigation. Remember being told to back off by men above my pay grade. Always wondered why. I can't come now. Passes are blocked and I'm tracking Confederate gold thieves heading for Mexico. But come spring, I'll be there. Keep yourself and the lady safe until then. Document everything. Be ready to testify. Justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Sometimes it just takes longer to ripen. Your friend, Tom Harrison. P.S. Ben Croft is still sheriff. Word is he's gotten rich in office. Judge Whitmore died 5 years back, but his son inherited more than money. Be careful. He believes us. Sarah breathed. He's coming, Silas agreed. Come spring, we'll have our chance. They spent the remaining weeks of winter preparing. Silas taught Sarah to shoot, setting up targets she could find by sound. She learned to load and clean weapons by touch, her fingers memorizing every part. I won't be helpless, she said fiercely after hitting 3 targets in a row. When they come, I'll stand beside you. Never thought you were helpless, Silas said, pride evident in his voice. Just want you prepared. The promise he'd made took shape on a quiet afternoon. Using silver from melted coins and skills half-remembered from watching a blacksmith, Silas crafted a simple ring. It wasn't fancy, wouldn't pass muster in Boston society, but it was honest work made with love. Sarah, he said one evening as February waned toward March. "I made you a promise." He took her hand, slipped the ring onto her finger. "It's not much." "It's perfect." She felt the ring, understanding every hammer mark, every imperfection that made it real. "Like us. Will you marry me real and proper? When we get to town, want the whole world to know you're mine and I'm yours." "Yes," she said simply. "Though in my heart, we're already married. Have been since you chose to save me and I chose to stay." They made their own vows that night, standing before the fire with the mountain as their witness. Simple words, but weighted with everything they'd survived and everything they hoped to build. "I, Silas Kane, take you, Sarah Mills, as my wife, in sunshine and storm, in plenty and want, in justice and injustice, until death parts us. I, Sarah Mills, take you, Silas Kane, as my husband, in darkness and light, in danger and safety, in truth and lies, until death parts us." They sealed it with a kiss that tasted of whiskey and promises, of winter ending and spring approaching with all its terrible possibilities. Outside, an owl called through the darkness, and snow continued to fall. But inside the cabin, two people who'd found each other at the broken edges of the world held tight and refused to let go. They'd made their choice. Now they just had to live long enough to see it through. Spring came to the mountain like a violent awakening. Ice cracked like gunshots in the night, streams roared to life, and avalanches thundered down distant slopes. The world that had been locked in white silence for months suddenly burst with sound and movement. Silas stood at the edge of his property, no longer the hollow-eyed ghost who'd hidden here for 15 years. The man who looked down at Cedar Falls was harder, leaner, with purpose burning in his eyes like forge fire. Beside him, Sarah gripped his hand. Her unseeing eyes turned toward the valley that held their fate. "Tell me what you see," she said quietly. Town's grown. More buildings, wider streets. Railroad came through just like they planned, cutting right through where our house stood. His jaw tightened. "Where Martha died." "And where we'll find justice." They'd prepared for weeks. Documents carefully wrapped in oilcloth. Weapons cleaned and loaded. Sarah's shooting practiced until she could hit targets by sound alone. Tom Harrison's last letter had arrived with a thaw. "I'll be in Cedar Falls by the 15th. Stay hidden until then." But Silas had lived in shadows long enough. They descended the mountain on horseback, Sarah riding behind him, arms wrapped around his waist. The horse picked its way carefully down paths swollen with snowmelt, through forests coming alive with birdsong. Every mile brought them closer to civilization, to danger, to truth. "Someone's coming," Sarah said, her hearing sharper than his eyes. Silas pulled the horse into tree cover just as 3 riders appeared on the trail below. He recognized Ben Croft immediately, still wearing the sheriff's star that should have been Silas's, still carrying himself with the swagger of a man who'd gotten away with murder. "Whitmore's madder than a hornet," one deputy was saying. "Says he won't believe that girl's dead until he sees bones. Harold needs to find himself another bride and forget about it." Croft replied, "Though I admit, her inheritance would have been nice to get our hands on. The Boston shipping connections alone." They passed without noticing the watchers above, and Silas felt Sarah's arms tighten around him. "They talk about my death like discussing cattle prices," she whispered. "Men like that don't see people, just opportunities." They reached Cedar Falls as afternoon shadows grew long. Silas guided them to the stable run by Abel Morrison, one of the few men who'd remained neutral during his exile. "Sweet Jesus," Abel breathed, seeing him. "Silas Kane, thought you were dead or gone to California." "Not dead, not gone. Need to stable the horse. Abel, and your silence." The old man's eyes flicked to Sarah, took in her careful movements, the way Silas guided her. "That the Whitmore bride that went missing—" "Mrs. Kane now," Silas said firmly. Abel's weathered face cracked in a grin. Well, I'll be damned. Good for you. Sheriff? Always said you got a raw deal. I'm not sheriff anymore. You are to folks who remember what real law looked like. They took a room at the Riverside Inn under false names. Though Silas knew word would spread fast, Cedar Falls was too small for secrets, which was what he counted on. That evening, Sarah sat by the window, listening to the town sounds she hadn't heard in months. Horses, voices, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer. "It's so loud," she said. "After the mountains quiet, all this noise feels like drowning." "We won't stay long, just until—" A knock interrupted him. Silas drew his gun, positioned Sarah behind cover, then opened the door to find Tom Harrison, grayer than memory, badge still bright on his vest. "Hello, Silas," the marshal said. "Been a long time." They embraced like brothers, and Silas felt something ease in his chest. He wasn't alone in this anymore. Tom's eyes found Sarah. "Mrs. Kane, pleased to meet you, ma'am. Sorry it's under these circumstances." "Marshal Harrison." She extended her hand with uncanny accuracy. "Silas has told me so much about you. All lies, I'm sure." But Tom's voice was kind. "Now, let's talk about how we're going to nail these bastards to the wall." They spent hours going over evidence, testimony, strategy. Tom had brought 2 deputies he trusted, men from outside the county who owed nothing to local power. "Crofts got everyone in his pocket," Tom explained. "But federal authority trumps local. We arrest him and Whitmore simultaneously, before they can destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses." "What witnesses?" Silas asked. "Everyone who might have talked is dead or bought." "Not everyone." Tom smiled grimly. "Doctor, Fell's widow is still alive, living with her sister in Denver. She's agreed to testify about the threats her husband received before his death. And there's more. Land records that don't match. Bank accounts that tell interesting stories. 15 years is a long time to hide crimes. People get sloppy." "When?" Sarah asked. "Tomorrow. Dawn raid on both houses. Clean and quick." That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, watching the town that had once been his to protect. Sarah joined him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Scared?" she asked. "Terrified. Not of dying, of failing, of letting Martha down again, letting you down." "You won't." She turned his face toward her. "Tomorrow, everyone will know the truth. Silas Kane isn't a monster. He's a good man who survived terrible things and came back to make them right. With help from a woman who sees clearer than anyone with working eyes. They made love with desperate tenderness, aware it might be their last night together if things went wrong. When dawn painted the sky pink, they dressed in their best clothes. Silas in a black suit that had waited 15 years for this day. Sarah in a simple dress that emphasized her quiet dignity. Tom arrived with his deputies and a surprise Judge Theodore Walsh from the Territorial Court, come to ensure proper legal proceedings. "Heard about this situation," the judge said. "Never liked how it was handled. Time to clean house." They moved through empty streets to the sheriff's office. Croft was there early. As Silas knew he would be, the man had always been first to arrive, eager to appear dedicated. "Ben," Silas said, stepping through the door. Croft's coffee cup shattered on the floor. His hand went to his gun, then froze as he saw the federal badges. The judge, the inevitability of justice, finally arrived. "Silas," his voice cracked, "you're supposed to be—" "Dead like Martha, like Doctor. Fell like all the others who got in your way. Now hold on." "Benjamin Croft." Tom Harrison stepped forward. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, corruption, and about a dozen other charges we'll sort out at trial." Croft made one last attempt, lunging for his gun. Silas moved faster, 15 years of suppressed rage lending him speed. His fist connected with Croft's jaw, dropping the man who'd betrayed him. That's for Martha, Silas said quietly. The rest is for the law. At the Whitmore mansion, Harold proved less cooperative. Warned somehow. He'd barricaded himself inside with hired guns. It might have been a bloodbath if not for Sarah. Let me talk to him, she said. He wanted to marry me. Maybe curiosity will make him listen. Against Silas's protests, she approached the house, using her cane to navigate. Harold Whitmore, she called. It's Sarah Mills, your mail-order bride. Don't you want to know how I survived? Silence, then movement at a window. You're supposed to be dead. Whitmore's voice was shrill with panic. Your men are poor searchers, but I'm here now. Come out and face me like a man, or hide inside like the coward who murdered 2 wives for their money. Mary's horse never spooked in its life until the day she died. Elizabeth never walked near cliffs because heights terrified her. Did you think no one noticed? Did you think you could keep killing women for profit? The front door opened. Harold Whitmore emerged, gun in hand but pointed down. He was younger than Silas expected, handsome in a weak-chinned way that probably appealed to some women. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Your father's papers prove everything, Tom Harrison said, stepping into view. Amazing what people write down when they think they're untouchable. Contracts for murders, payments to witnesses, plans for the railroad that required certain properties to be vacant. My father is dead, but his records aren't. Found them in that hidden safe in his study, the one you didn't know about. It was a bluff, but Whitmore's face went white. The safe, but only Father and Ben knew. And just like that, he'd confessed. The deputies moved in, disarming him as his hired guns melted away, unwilling to fight federal marshals for a lost cause. By noon, both men sat in cells in their own jail. The town gathered in the street, buzzing with shock and dawning understanding. Silas stood on the sheriff's office steps, Sarah beside him, as Tom Harrison addressed the crowd. 15 years ago, this town let fear and greed drive out an honest lawman. You believed lies because they were easier than truth. Some of you profited from it. Others just stayed silent. Today, that changes. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces showed shame, others defiance. A few, Abel Morrison among them, nodded with grim satisfaction. Silas Kane was innocent. Tom continued. His wife was murdered to clear the way for corruption that's poisoned this town ever since. But he came back. He sought justice through law, not vengeance. That's the kind of man he is. The kind of sheriff he was. Someone in the crowd started clapping. Then another. Soon, applause filled the street. Not universal, but enough. Enough to wash away some of the stain of 15 years. Judge Walsh stepped forward. Mr. Kane, this court finds all charges against you dismissed with prejudice. Your record is cleared. And if this town has any sense, they'll beg you to pin that star back on. But Silas shook his head. That life is done. I've got a different future now. He drew Sarah close. We both do. They were married that afternoon by Judge Walsh, with Tom Harrison as witness and half the town watching. Sarah wore wildflowers in her hair, columbine and Indian paintbrush that Silas had described so carefully she could see them in her mind. When they kissed, sealing their union legally at last. The mountains themselves seemed to echo with approval. I told you, Sarah whispered against his lips. I'd put a ring on you before winter ended. Technically, I put the ring on you, he pointed out. Details, she smiled, radiant with joy. The important thing is we're both wearing them now, legal and proper, like you wanted. As the sun set behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of fire, Silas and Sarah Kane stood together facing a future neither had dared imagine when winter began. Behind them lay graves and ghosts, pain and persecution. Ahead stretched unknown trails through a world made new by love and justice finally served. The courthouse in Cedar Falls had never seen such a crowd. People packed the galleries, lined the walls, and spilled out onto the street. After 15 years of whispers and rumors, the truth was finally being dragged into the light. Silas sat in the witness chair, his large frame filling it completely. Across from him, Ben Croft and Harold Whitmore sat shackled at the defendant's table, their expensive lawyer looking increasingly desperate as evidence mounted. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor said. "Silas Kane, former sheriff of Cedar Falls. Tell us about the night of the fire." Silas's voice was steady as he recounted the story. The suspicious call to the Jameson Ranch, returning to find his home in ashes, his pregnant wife dead, the too quick appearance of evidence, the rush to judgment. "Did you kill your wife, Mr. Kane?" "No, sir. I loved Martha more than life itself." From the gallery, Sarah listened to every word, her hands folded over the slight swell of her belly where new life grew. Tom Harrison sat beside her, describing the defendant's reactions in whispered asides. "Croft's sweating," Tom murmured. "Whitmore looks like he might faint." The real bombshell came with the prosecution's surprise witness, Eleanor Fell, the doctor's widow. She'd aged severely in 5 years, but her voice was clear as she told of threats against her husband, of his anguish at being forced to falsify documents. "He kept copies," she said, producing a leather portfolio. "Hidden in our root cellar. Said if anything happened to him, I should take them to federal authorities. I was too frightened then. I'm not anymore." The documents were damning. Death certificates with causes of death altered. Property transfers predated. A ledger showing payments from Judge Whitmore to various officials, including Ben Croft. Harold Whitmore cracked first. "It was all Ben's idea," he burst out, ignoring his lawyer's attempts to silence him. "And my father's. I just wanted the women's money. I never meant—" "You never meant for them to die?" the prosecutor asked coldly. "Just like Mary Whitmore never meant to fall from her horse, just like Elizabeth Whitmore never meant to slip off that cliff. They were supposed to be accidents, clean, simple accidents, but that blind girl survived, and everything went wrong." Sarah's voice cut through the courtroom chaos. "I have a name, Mr. Whitmore, Sarah Kane, and yes, I survived. Your incompetence at murder is matched only by your cowardice now." Judge Walsh gavelled for order, but damage was done. Harold had implicated himself and Croft in one panicked outburst. Ben Croft tried a different strategy when his turn came. He painted himself as a young deputy led astray by powerful men, forced to participate or lose everything. "Silas was my friend," he said, manufacturing tears. "I never wanted to hurt him, but Judge Whitmore threatened my family, said he'd ruin us if I didn't cooperate." "So you let an innocent man be driven from his home?" the prosecutor pressed. "Let him live as a fugitive for 15 years. "I had no choice." "You had every choice," Silas said quietly from his seat. "You chose greed over friendship, power over justice. Don't insult this court by pretending otherwise." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Murder, conspiracy, corruption, fraud. The list seemed endless. Both men would hang, though the judge commuted Whitmore's sentence to life imprisonment in consideration of his cooperation. As the deputies led them away, Croft looked back at Silas one last time. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "It's worth exactly what Martha's life was worth to you," Silas replied. "Nothing." Outside the courthouse, Cedar Falls seemed to exhale collectively. The shadow that had lain over the town for 15 years was finally lifting. People approached Silas and Sarah, some offering apologies, others just wanting to shake hands with the man who'd fought back and won. "What now?" Tom Harrison asked as they stood on the street where it all began. "Now we go home," Sarah said, her hand finding Silas's. "Our real home." They'd already decided. Not the mountain cabin, though they'd keep it for summer retreats, not Cedar Falls, with its bitter memories. Instead, they'd bought a small ranch in the valley between Close enough to town for supplies, but far enough for peace. "The Kane Ranch," Silas said, testing the words. "Has a nice sound." "Better than the Whitmore Ranch would have," Sarah agreed. "Though I do appreciate Harold's donation to our future." The courts had awarded her not only her own inheritance, but compensation from the Whitmore estate for attempted murder. Justice sometimes came with financial benefits. 6 months later, as autumn painted the aspens gold, Sarah gave birth to their daughter. They named her Hope Martha Kane, for the future and the past, for what was lost and what was found. "She has your eyes," the midwife said, then caught herself, embarrassed. Sarah just smiled. "Tell me about them." "Blue as mountain lakes," Silas said, cradling his daughter, "and already looking at the world like she's figuring out how to change it." "Like her mother," the midwife observed. "God help us all," Silas laughed. Tom Harrison visited regularly, bringing news from the wider world. Ben Croft had been hanged on schedule, going to his end still proclaiming he was more victim than villain. Harold Whitmore had lasted exactly 1 month in prison before other inmates, learning of his habit of murdering wives, delivered their own justice. "Can't say I mourn them," Tom admitted, "though I prefer when the law handles things properly." "The law did its job," Silas said. "Everything else is just balance finding its way." The ranch prospered. Silas raised horses and cattle, his size and strength serving him well in honest work. Sarah, with the help of a hired girl who served as her eyes when needed, managed the household and kept the books. Her blindness had sharpened her memory for numbers, making her a formidable business partner. In the evenings, they sat on their porch watching the sunset Silas described and the stars Sarah remembered. Hope played at their feet, already showing signs of her father's stubbornness and her mother's determination. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked one night. "Not taking the sheriff's position when they offered it back." "Not for a second. That was the young man's dream. I'm not him anymore." "Who are you now?" "Husband, father, rancher. Man who learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. And what matters?" He pulled her close, their daughter babbling happily between them. "This, right here. You two are my whole world." "3, Sarah corrected, hand moving to her belly again. "Come spring, we'll be 5. Silas's whoop of joy echoed across the valley, startling cattle and sending night birds into flight. Hope laughed at her father's antics while Sarah smiled with quiet satisfaction. "Twins, the doctor thinks," she added, "based on how I'm carrying." "Twins." Silas sounded dazed. "Lord help us." "He already has," Sarah pointed out. "More than we ever dared hope for." As if in agreement, a shooting star blazed across the sky. Silas described it to Sarah, who made a wish she didn't share, but that came true anyway. A long life together, more children to fill their home, and peace that lasted. Years later, when people told the story of Silas and Sarah Kane, they focused on different parts. Some emphasized the mystery and murder, the corruption that nearly destroyed a good man. Others preferred the romance, the mail-order bride who found unexpected love with the mountain hermit who saved her. But those who knew them best told a simpler truth. 2 broken people had found each other in the wilderness and discovered that together they were whole. That love could grow in the harshest ground. Justice could prevail against the longest odds. And sometimes, just sometimes, the monsters in our stories turn out to be the heroes we need. The mountains still stood guard over the valley, ancient and enduring. In its shadow, the Kane Ranch flourished, full of laughter and life. And on clear nights, when the stars shone bright enough to light the whole world, you could sometimes see a giant of a man dancing with a blind woman on their porch, their children clapping along, their love as constant as the peaks themselves. It was, everyone agreed, one hell of a happily ever after. Thank you all for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Silas and Sarah's journey from tragedy to triumph. Where are you listening to this story from? Please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about this tale of love, justice, and redemption in the Colorado mountains. Your support means everything, and I'd love to hear what touched your heart in this story.